All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Waller, and I'm the Program Director here at Grantmakers for Education. On behalf of our Executive Director, Nicole Rodriguez-Leach, and the entire Ed Funders team, we just want to thank you for joining us and welcome you to this afternoon's webinar entitled Young Adult Perspectives on Student-Centered Education. We're also really excited to be putting this afternoon's session on in partnership with our friends at National Center for Montessori in the Public Sector. So also just want to thank and give a shout out to Sarah and Monique from the NCMPS team and shout out their colleagues as well. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So as just a point of framing for today's conversation, across the education landscape, from practitioners to policymakers, funders as well, there are lots of conversations happening about what student-centered learning really looks like and what it means to create the kind of spaces for learning where students can show up in the fullness of their identities and gain the skills that they need to really thrive in life and not just at school. And our team thought there was really no better way to gain insights on that topic than to speak directly with young people. So we're really excited to be able to share space with Anuka, Brittany, Michael, and Sebastian today. And we really want this to be a conversation. So there will be some time at the end for questions as well. But as folks are talking throughout the webinar today, please feel free to drop questions into the chat. And we would love to be able to address them as we go along. And as just an additional point of context, again, we're really excited to be able to share space with the folks on the panel today. We wanted to take some time to hear directly from them about their educational experiences and how those experiences shaped them to be who they are today. Each of our panelists is a young adult thriving in their own right. Some of them are college students, others are pursuing their career aspirations, but they each have a unique lived experience and journey to kind of reflect on and share today. Each of our panelists also have something in common in that some of their formative K-12 years were spent in Montessori programs. And so just as a point of grounding, we wanted to make sure that we shared some context for folks on the call who may not be as familiar with the Montessori model. So this information on this slide actually comes from a resource from the NCMPS website that we will also share out in the chat. But we thought that it was important to highlight some of the essentials of the Montessori model, which include features like student choice, mixed age groupings, uninterrupted independent work periods, Montessori materials, comprehensive curriculum, personalized learning. And all of these essentials are really grounded in child development research, and each is implemented differently at different age levels based on a child's specific developmental needs. In addition, you may be wondering what this really looks like in practice. So we have the good fortune not only to hear from one of our panelists today as an adult, but we also have a video clip that I'm going to share quickly that features one of our panelists, Brittany, as a fifth grader, walking through an example of a Montessori classroom. So I'm going to quickly share that snippet.
Children ages 3, 4, and 5. Basically, it's preschool and kindergarten all together. That's great because the students get a chance to help each other learn. Of course, there is a Montessori teacher with special Montessori training to show the students what to do. There's even an assistant in the class all day to help out. Montessori kids get right to work. As you can see, there's plenty to choose from. The projects are all on low shelves, so the students can pick out work on their own. Teachers give lessons on each material before students can use them. A teacher can give a lesson to just one student, a small group of students, or the whole classroom. After that, they can practice alone, work with a friend, or get help from an older student until they master the challenging work. The younger students love watching and learning from the older students, and the older students love being the classroom leaders. Helping the younger students helps the older student community. They stay in the same class for 3 years, working with the same teacher. The teacher keeps track of all the work, and when a student masters the work, it's time for the next lesson and another exciting challenge to master. The material is fun to use, so it's easy to get motivated to learn. This 3-year-old student is working in the practical life area. That's where you wash, pour, polish, and do other activities. They help develop concentration, independence, order, fine, and gross motor skills.
So with that little bit of a primer, I'm really excited to be able to now invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves and really jump into the conversation today. So I'm going to ask each panelist to share your name, what you're up to. If you're a college student, where do you go to school? What are you studying? If you are working, what kind of work do you do? And also let us know how long you attended a Montessori program. So it feels only right to kick it over first to Brittany O'Grady to introduce yourself to the folks on the call today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brittany O'Grady. I am an actor, and I did Montessori from the age of 3 to 6th grade in Arlington, Virginia. Yeah.
Thank you, Brittany. Michael, I'm going to kick it to you.
Hello, my name is Michael O'Grady. I'm a current college sophomore at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, and I'm a creative director for our women's basketball team. And in addition to that, I'm a freelance videographer and photographer.
Welcome. Glad that you're here. Nuka, I'll kick it to you next.
Hi, my name is Anuka Pazia. I'm a current sophomore at Syracuse University, and I'm also in the Renee Crown Honors Program here. And then outside of just being a student, I'm also a lab assistant at Upstate Medical University.
Thank you for being here. And finally, Sebastian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sebastian Rivera. I currently do capital and investment risk for Global Atlantic Financial Group in New York. And I went to Montessori school from kindergarten through 8th grade.
Awesome. It's great to have you all on the call today. So as a jump off point, I want to start with a 2-part question. The first part is, what sticks out to you most from your Montessori experience as you reflect today? And the second part of that question is, what are some skills that you are currently using in your adult life that experience really helped introduce to you or help you build and develop? I'll get to Michael first for that one.
For sure. I think one thing that really stuck out to me was the dynamic of having different ages in the classroom and kind of learning to be a leader. It also helped embrace kind of like that family dynamic, like everyone's here to help you, and you don't need to be afraid to ask a question. It's a very welcoming and very uplifting environment. Really drive those social motor skills at a really young age. And I think definitely in the work I'm doing, managing like a bunch of creatives and bouncing ideas and kind of trying to uplift towards a common goal in our work. The project management skills that I got from Montessori definitely are very apparent at this very high level of work that we're doing here in Los Angeles. And I think that's one thing that I'm super thankful for, kind of in my day-to-day life.
Thank you so much. Anuka, I'll kick that same question to you next.
Okay, so before I forget, I also did attend Montessori from pre-K through 8th grade. For me, I remember, especially in lower elementary and like upper elementary, so like 1st through 5th grade, I remember a big thing that my teachers really like encouraged was like our natural curiosity, and to really encourage us to, do as we feel. In the video, it talks about how like they teach you the general lesson, of course, but then, you go on and then to master it yourself. And a lot of that was playing around with material and, getting a sense for it. And then eventually you kind of figure out what my 4th and 5th grade teacher would call it the rule to whatever it was. This was mainly in math, because that was what I did a lot of when I was in 4th and 5th grade. And I'd be like, oh my God, like I just got the rule. And I think that was what helped me like remember it better, like future, because 4th and 5th grade, like all those math skills in particular, like that is setting up the base for, you know, essentially 6th and beyond. And I think that is like really practically applied in my current lab assistant position. Of course, like I do have a set of experiments and, you know, things I need to do, but at the same time, they also told me like, don't be afraid to just mess around in the lab. Like, okay, within like certain reason, of course, but they're like, you know, the point of this, you know, project that we're doing is to explore and try to figure out, you know, what the project is figuring out, which I'm not allowed to disclose, but they really do give me also the freedom to explore. And I feel like the one thing is like I had that natural curiosity and creativity to do that. And I think that's something that Montessori really taught me. And I just use it now, and they praise me for it. So here I am, year 2 of being a lab assistant. So
Thank you so much for sharing. Sebastian, please take it away.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Anuka said, and you know what really sticks out to me is, it sounds a little silly, but I feel like Montessori kind of like you learned how to learn in a sense, because you had so much, you know, minimal guidance. And let me not say minimal, but you know, it wasn't hand holding the whole time. You got introduced to a topic and then you went on to master it by yourself, or, you know, learn from your colleagues. And I feel like that's something that I still do today in my life. You know, learning on the spot, leaning on colleagues, and just, you know, figuring things out on the fly.
For sure. Folks were in the prep room when we were navigating lots of technological challenges, learning on the fly and like going with it 100%. Brittany, same question for you. What sticks out most to you, and what are some skills that you're using in your adult life now?
I love that question. To piggyback off of what Sebastian said, I think being able to work in group environments is so important. As an actor, I'm somebody that feels a lot of feelings and tells stories and works with other people to create those stories and also to make those stories come to life. And so a lot of times in theater or on film sets, you can't make anything happen without a whole group of people. And I think the one thing that Montessori has done, it has allowed me to enhance my individuality and enhance my strengths as a person, instead of trying to fit into one box, and also finding ways that can benefit someone else and vice versa. And I think it's also taught me to, I really love the way that I was spoken to as a child. I'm 27 years old now, and I still remember my first day of school and the way that my teacher, Miss Diane or Miss DeHart, spoke to me and introduced me to the classroom. I'm still friends with my peers who are in that classroom today. And I think that's the way that I go about speaking to others. The way that I was treated in the classroom is the way that I treat others in my work. And I think it's just really shaped me as a person. And through that has helped me in my career to really value and appreciate people in all walks of life in the space that I'm in, instead of kind of being more of a self-focused person and seeing success in only one way.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate the reflection that you lifted up just around how you developed as a person, which I think is a really good segue to another question that I'm going to ask, just based on kind of where we are in the present moment. A big conversation that's happening in education is just around young people's well-being, as we kind of reflect on being post-COVID and racial reckoning and so many kind of traumatic experiences that young people had to experience in social isolation sometimes, and just the general feeling that students are showing up to school not always feeling heard or fully seen or understood. I'm curious about how your own experience in a Montessori setting helped your identity development and kind of your sense of self-awareness.
I have, oh, go ahead, Mikey, go ahead.
I'll kick it off. I think that one thing I can really credit Montessori for was definitely kind of my descent through middle school. I definitely felt like I was very kind of like an oddball, so to speak, kind of going through. Um, like one of those kids that was like a little bit, different than others in kind of a way that like not many people understood. And my teachers, which I had the privilege of having for 3 years, really kind of honed in on me as a person and kind of really was able to pick my brain in those ways that were very helpful to kind of my development through middle school, especially in such a transformative time. I think it definitely made me feel like, there's somebody for everybody, so to speak. Like everyone can see something in you and kind of really harness that, and that you don't have to really feel like you're on the outside looking in. And it really helped me, especially as a creative, kind of appreciating my own ideas and really being able to bring out kind of the best of myself and come to certain situations with confidence, especially as someone doing my work now. It's a lot of self-starting, especially as a videographer and someone who does a lot of creative direction. It's a lot of betting on yourself and coming in with that confidence. And I feel like the environment that you're kind of embraced in, especially kind of going up through 3 years of education with the same teacher, you really are kind of instilled with that value of self-confidence and care, that everybody should have, but sometimes it's more of a luxury than an essential for some. So it's kind of like really a privilege that's special to this program and definitely helps me in my professional career now.
And Nuka, I'm going to kick that question over to you too, around just identity development, self-awareness, and how your educational experience may have shaped that.
Okay, it's actually really funny because Michael and I went to the same school. So I've known him for a really long time, and like years later, like we're still friends. So I did actually see Michael go from the oddball kid in class to, the person that he is today, and I'm really proud of him and like how far he's come. And I think that's a really good question because I think especially post COVID, because I have a younger sister who did her, I think, fourth, fifth. I think COVID hit her fourth grade year, like so at the right at the end of it, she's going into middle school, which was a very like, from my own like remembering of it, like a pretty traumatic experience because everyone's going through the awkward phase, or you're trying to like, oh my God, like am I gonna fit in, blah blah blah. So, and then my younger brother, who is 17 now, so I think he was a freshman entering during COVID. So I really got to see their development, and they also did go through Montessori. But my sister's in her last year. So looking at all three of our perspectives and like looking at the similarities and differences, I think one of the many good things that Montessori does throughout your development is the teachers don't treat you as like lesser than. Like they don't treat you like, oh, I'm a teacher and I'm in a position of power. They're more like they really do get to see you because it is a smaller class and you tend to be with the same teacher for multiple years. They not only create this environment where you're comfortable with them, but like they really create that sense of community and family, like Mikey was saying earlier, that you don't feel scared to explore your own identity. And like, there is no right or wrong answer to your identity, of course. And I think that's so key because if you look at like developmental stages of an adolescence, like a lot of that is developed during younger years and does surround like authority figures. And one of your first authority figures will be your teacher outside your parents and family, friends, and whatnot. But those are people you've grown up with. So of course you won't be like necessarily scared of them. So when you go into school, your teachers, assistant teachers, and whatnot will all be your first authority figure in that sense. So the fact that they were able to create such an intimate relationship, and then create that environment where you are able to explore your identity, and there is no reprimanding of that. Like, okay, yes, like you make mistakes and whatnot, but they help guide you through those mistakes, and never make you feel like a lesser than person or like, oh, I'm such a like dumb little child. No, it's like you're a child and you're growing. So, and I'm the adult who's gone through life. So let me help you. And I think I really see that in my brother and sister because I'm just, watching them. And my sister had the same teachers I've had. So like seeing her develop with the, same teachers and seeing how it's not just like a fluke accident with me, but rather like they do the same thing. They still replicate the same thing. It's just in their characteristics. And that's just like yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's something that helped me, and I apply it because now I don't think of people as like, if I'm like a leader or whatever, it's not like, oh, I'm a leader, but these are my peers and my equals, and I'll treat them as such. And so then the group just works more cohesively. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't want to cut anybody off. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to offer before we pivot questions just on identity development, self-awareness? Okay.
No, I would just echo everything that has been said already. And, fortunate, like me, I feel privileged that I was able to go to a Montessori school, and, I echo everything that was said.
So I want to pivot to another kind of hot button topic of conversation in the education space right now, and that is the pace of change and the rate of change in the world of generative AI and all kinds of technology advances. I'm curious from each of our panelists, how is what you learned in those Montessori settings that you were just describing kind of relevant to that conversation about the pace of change, technology, and how that's going to be impacting young people in educational settings?
Yeah, I think I can kick that off. I mean, the pace of change is, certainly scary, right? Like, and I say that as, my colleague to my left is spending 75% of his time automating stuff that could potentially like eliminate my job one day. But I think, one thing that was special about Montessori is you're typically in an environment where something is always kind of changing, right? So whether you're working on the test tubes and someone's 2 years older than you, they're working on a different set of materials, right? You're in an environment where you're kind of used to seeing things change all the time. And so, leaning back on that, it's not as, I guess, scary, if you will. And like you feel, at least personally, I feel a little bit more prepared to, deal with rapid change.
Kind of echoing that, I think this is a big kind of new thing that's affecting my industry specifically, especially in the arts world with everything that AI can do, from creating fake photos to creating new pieces of artwork, and now recently trying to get into video as well. I think the biggest thing that Montessori has taught me, especially in my line of work, is adaptability and kind of learning how to use these tools as kind of supporters rather than rivals. Some people look at it that way, but I feel like we really kind of need to learn to shift that perspective and learn to adapt to this new world, because change comes whether you like it or not. And I think that's something that you really need to, really harness. And I think in the very independent nature and kind of the, harnessing the whole child and letting them kind of learn on their own, it really kind of helps create like a nice base foundation when it comes to transfer those skills into adult life. So I think, especially in my line of work, you go producing videos that go out to millions of people, and now there's this new thing that changes the game, and it's like, we've never done that before. That's never how we've done that. Learning to take these new things and adapting them into your current workflow that has worked for so long, that's a skill that's so valuable. You can't really teach that, but you can really have it ingrained and set a solid foundation. So when you're an adult and you're working in an industry producing on such a large level, you're able to succeed and, really work well in this wild, wild west we got going on right now.
So I heard the theme from both Michael and Sebastian around being able to adapt to change. Are there other skills that folks will need to navigate this changing world, and how prepared do you all feel to navigate change? I'm curious if other skills, adaptability was one that was named, but are there others that come to mind for you as you reflect on your educational experience and kind of where you are as adults today?
I think one thing that I'm thinking about for me in my line of work, I'm sure I think a lot of people know about the SAG-AFTRA and writer strike that's going on right now, and the challenges that we're facing with AI, and how it can, strip people of jobs and their creativity. And it's a very in-depth thing there. But one thing I think about Montessori, I always come back to, is the element of community and thinking about how you impact your community through your actions, because we're encouraged to coexist with our classroom and our ecosystem that we create for a year, for the 3 years that we're there in that either lower elementary, upper elementary. And I think the one thing that I really have ingrained in me is having a community-based thinking, because in my line of work, there are actors, there's a very few actors who make, lots of money and are the faces you see all the time. And then the majority of them are working actors who really love their job, who are deeply impacted. And also there's a whole other community of people that are impacted as well, that are not writers and actors. And so I think Montessori does have this great educational background and force of, you're in a classroom working with somebody, and then you're also learning about the environment. You're learning about all different aspects of life that impact one another while you're living it. Is your kindness and your intelligence, are you going to share that with the students coming up in the classroom? And how does that help us as a community? So I think that that's something, that's a skill, being able to think about not just yourself, but others consistently, and how certain things impact one another. That's the empathy, or the emotional intelligence, I think, is one thing that is practiced often in Montessori. And just, has all of these bright people here have mentioned, just being able to embrace your leadership skills. And I think there's a lot of leaders here who are making brave steps to adapt to change, but also stand up for people who would be deeply impacted in a negative way. But I also think that I've also watched incredible artists use AI to their advantage to help them come up with a creation that's really brilliant as well in the artistic field. So it's very unknown territory. And as Sebastian said, I think it's about adapting and always knowing that things are going to change, and having the confidence that your teacher instills in you, like Anuka said, to be able to adapt. So I feel like everyone's just touched on these really great points.
Totally agree. Anuka, you look like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to piggyback off like everyone's ideas. I think Brittany brings up a really good point about like the sense of community that Montessori instills. And I think like going off of that, especially like for me, like there was a lot of like group think moments and like group work, of course, like very creative, where I remember one time in particular, we were, I think, studying Native American tribes in Virginia. And we were like, okay, let's recreate like with like, I don't know, like different clay, like materials, like what their like landscape would have looked like. And one thing that, obviously now that I'm in college and also doing group work and public health, in a lot of all my classes, actually, they emphasize the need for like, we need to have a collaborative effort. Like a lot of public health work is collaborative because, I mean, it is for the public and, for everyone's well-being. And I remember during those like little projects and things we do, everyone's important. And I think Montessori really emphasized that with just the amount of like things you would do and hands-on, because not everyone's going to have, the same skill set, like, and you have to learn how to play to each other's strengths and, be able to help each other for those little moments that, they may be struggling and whatnot. And you would think that's something that a lot of people would learn, but I think after being in traditional, during high school, and again, that could just be the high school model. I don't really exactly know since I only did Montessori. But from what I'm generally hearing from other kids, they did have, sit in desks, and they weren't really doing these type of collaborative work. They just kind of like do worksheets and not really like explore and like, work with someone else and that type of things. So now that I'm in college and, working with other people, I don't want to say they don't have teamwork, but I think that it's clear that they did develop it later. Like it's not a natural sense to them. Like it doesn't just come as naturally, just because not only did our classes have group work, but also, it was mixed classes and mixed ages. Like lower elementary was first, second, third, and then upper L was fourth and fifth, and then pre-K and kindergarten. And then middle school, it was a mix from there. And you're learning how to, interact with all these people, and create like a healthy, cohesive environment. And of course, like with kids, fights and whatever disputes always happen, but the teachers really did create this place where you could talk and work it out. And I think with AI and all of these new advancements, and as someone who's going into healthcare, I think of course like AI will, I think to a certain extent, won't be able to take over what humans will have to be able to do, just because of the creativity it requires to do solve certain problems. But I think that Michael is right that you have to have that flexibility to just adapt to it and use it for the better, because we're creating these tools and they're tools. They should be considered tools because we have the creativity to create them, so we can use them to even boost that. And I think that's just a really cool thing. And I think, yeah, if we shift the perspective, I think change it from like a curse to a blessing, like it would just totally change the like how we're talking about it. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights. I want to elevate a question that came in through the chat and encourage folks to continue to drop questions into the chat for our panelists. But Richard was asking, or first reflecting, that obviously Montessori education has amazing power, and just reflecting on what you all have shared so far. What thoughts do you have about how Montessori education can be better branded and marketed to raise public visibility of Montessori and expand kind of public access and equitable access to that kind of model? So something to think about. Maybe I'll kick it to Michael as somebody who thinks about kind of creative and branding and communications, but anyone can answer.
For sure. I'm a marketing major, so this is kind of like my bread and butter. I think the one thing about Montessori, and definitely this is something that I've seen firsthand, is a lot of people just aren't really familiar. I think I was in a Montessori middle school program, me and Anuka, and it was kind of a hybrid program where we would be in Montessori for a good chunk of our classes, and then we'd kind of delve out to some of the traditional classes where we'd be with everybody. And a lot of people just didn't really have that familiarity of like, what is it that you guys are actually doing? And I think it kind of all ties back into that fear of the unknown. You can't really sell something that people don't really know about. And I feel like events like these, like we're having right now, are really a good kind of first step in kind of educating on, what we're about and how this is like a successful program. And I think one thing is that this isn't a very popular, or not popular, but it's not as widespread as you get older. I feel like there's a lot of primary Montessori elementary schools and preschools, but you don't really see it as much at like the older level, especially not in the public sector. That's where the majority of our kids are. So I feel like there are success stories, like in Arlington Public Schools specifically, there is public Montessori, and we've seen that it does really well. And I feel like it's really about getting the word out there, because at the end of the day, it's hard to sell something that people don't know about. So just creating that trust and that familiarity through events like these, and making sure we can get the word out there is just the best way to sell and be more marketable, because people buy a brand that they can trust. That's why you buy the name brand and not the general brand, is because you buy something that works.
I appreciate that insight. Thank you for sharing. I have a question that I'm going to first kick to Sebastian, and that is just around leadership development specifically. So I know that you in your current work manage other people. And so I'm wondering about, as you reflect on kind of the skills that you've developed as a leader and managing others and helping them navigate the workspace, how has your Montessori experience or just education experience in general kind of informed how you approach leadership and management?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that comes to my mind is, and it was highlighted in that video as at the start, which gave me a lot of nostalgia. It's like, when you're at that first year in your 3-year kind of range, right, you're being taught the next step, right? And then as you progress, you get to teach the next one behind you, right? So early on, you develop the skills to kind of show someone how to do something and work with them and partner with them, and you're constantly in a team. And I think that's something that's certainly stuck with me in my career. But then, also, there is the element of you're not always going to have like start to finish instructions. And so there's a bit of, you kind of need to figure it out on your own element as well. And so I know that's something that like my team today kind of prides themselves on is, our manager can say, here's the task of the day, like, good luck, we'll check back in at 6. And so I think that, that having that kind of experience early on just kind of stuck with me throughout my career. And that's kind of like my mindset now with things. Like whenever I face the unknown, it's just like, okay, we're going to figure it out. And then on to the next task.
I want to invite any other panelists who might have reflections to share about your own leadership and how you show it in the various spaces that you are navigating.
I think that one thing that Montessori kind of hones in on, as Sebastian just mentioned, is making sure that you're taking care of the people who are coming into the space. And so I think that one thing that I think is a standard is a sense of responsibility, that I think that a lot of leaders hopefully have or stay in touch with that sense of responsibility for others in their community. So there's a lot of things that we probably don't even think about subconsciously, like making sure that you put away the materials properly, or cleaning up. Like we're always like cleaning up I remember being in 4th and 5th grade, and it was our responsibility to make sure that we cleaned up everything and got the classroom set back to what it's supposed to be. And just having, responsibility for understanding the material. I'm trying to think what other, I mean, we had to take care of, living plants, or like just responsibility to make sure that the outcome came out successful, but not necessarily in a way where you get a grade. We also, like, I remember in 4th and 5th grade, we used to make bread every Friday. And I remember one time, I didn't responsibly look at the directions. Or we messed up some of the materials, so none of the classroom got bread because we messed it up. So there's like, and that's disappointing, right? So the bread was so good. So so I think that those are like little things that you kind of rely on. And you don't, you think like, wow, loaf of bread, or wow, just putting materials away, but you realize that it's going to impact the people around you, and then instilling that in your brain as you're developing as a child. I think it kind of continues on, and if those little seeds are planted and they start to grow as you get older. So those are like little interesting things that came to my memory. I'm sure all of us are feeling nostalgic, as you said, Sebastian. I'm like, oh, I remember I used to make bread. But yeah, those are things I think that kind of harness leadership skills, is the sense of responsibility that we consistently have to be in touch with.
I'm curious, as you all are reflecting about skills that you've gained, skills that you're still using today, have there been any particular challenges that you've navigated in your life as adults that either is like, I don't know that I necessarily had the tools to navigate this. This is something I wish I was better prepared for, or just something in general, like I didn't necessarily anticipate I'd be dealing with this, and it's been challenging for me?
I'll speak on this. I think one thing that I may have trouble with, but it's like more of a double negative, so it's a positive kind of thing, is that I think sometimes as someone who works very independently, especially as someone who does freelance, when it comes time to like kind of work in a system, sometimes you feel like kind of bounded by the limits that like the train that you're on is going, if that makes sense. Like sometimes you want to speed up, sometimes you want to go above and beyond, but everyone's kind of like on this same level and kind of trying to go at the same speed. And I think one thing that Montessori really taught me is that you can do as much as you want to do, kind of in terms of the peak. There's obviously a floor. You got to hit that floor. But as in terms of the peak, you can go as high up as you want to. And that's something that I take with me in my workflow. Especially as someone who does video work, there's not a lot of boundaries and limits on how far you can go and how much effort you want to put into something. And so when I worked my first internship this semester and kind of like working within the confines of that experience, it taught me so many valuable skills about working in a system and working in a team, beyond kind of like my independent, like my urge to kind of go above and beyond as much as I can, and bringing that and adapting it in a formal setting, kind of like working in a system, but bringing the system up as a unit, if that makes sense. So I think one thing is that I always strive to just go above and beyond. And I think sometimes not scaling it back, but kind of like learning to channel that into a team setting is something that definitely took some independent thought. But because of the Montessori like experience that I have, I was able to take that challenge and kind of move back into that theme of adaptability, adapt, and kind of really work in this professional setting. And I feel like it really helped me succeed this past summer when I was working, and just kind of bringing the best of all aspects in this one. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
So I just saw a question in the chat. I'll read it out actually so that everyone can see it. It says, people always ask about the transition out of Montessori. Could you do traditional school or take a test? And I think this kind of like, I'll answer this and then the question kind of together. The reason why I had to take a pause and try to think, like, do I feel like I was unprepared? I honestly don't. I think I'm also in college, so that also there is that transition time into like my full adulthood. So I'm like, I'm having my own apartment now, so I'm learning how to live my own, whatever. But I think, talking about transition times, the middle school that Mikey and I both went to, it was a hybrid, as you mentioned. Our sixth grade year, we took basically all Montessori classes except like our little elective and gym class. And that was, easy. So we still got used to like middle school, but then we were still within the confines of Montessori and had that as a safety blanket. And we're still, same like principles of Montessori still applied, but it was getting adapted into a middle school. Like we actually had like A to, F grades, like more deadlines, like strict deadlines and whatever. But like, teachers really were there to help us transition through that. And then seventh grade, you slowly start to transition out. So I remember God, it's been so many years, but I think seventh grade I took Algebra 1 with traditional, and then Spanish 1, and then everything else from my main core was in Montessori still. And then I was still getting used to the traditional model, and it was a struggle at first, don't get me wrong, but I think looking back, I remember everyone struggling just because, Algebra 1 is a harder concept. We're jumping from middle school math to high school math all of a sudden. And then Spanish, because it's a new language, I was like, oh my God, I don't even know, like I know the basics from Dora and whatnot. So it wasn't like I was one struggling alone. Like everyone collectively was struggling, but because sixth grade, like I was already prepared for like a middle school mindset. I didn't feel like, oh my God, this is like so intense, I can't transition. And then by eighth grade, when I only took science and math, or science and English in Montessori, I was like, oh, like high school's going to be easy. Like I don't really have to transition. Like I was able to take tests normally. And this is not to say we didn't have tests in middle school or in Montessori. We definitely did. I remember feeling very stressed for those. But by the time I got to high school, I was like, oh, this is just, it's whatever. Like I'm just in school. Like it's not really anything crazy. And now that I'm like in college, I'm like, wow, like I don't really feel any different. Like if anything, I honestly think college is a little easier than high school. I don't know if it's just the way that Arlington is and the standard that they have for the students is just being really high. So we were all like crazy and decided to take like all APs and whatnot. But that was definitely something I came into college feeling like, wow, I really do think like I was, somewhat set up. And then I think about also like the soft skills I learned in Montessori, like throughout middle school and when I left the program, like the soft skills, because like in the video we saw the kid cleaning the silver. Obviously, like I'm not cleaning silver at home or anything, but I am in my apartment. I'm cleaning my dishes and learning to clean up after myself. And I've talked to some people who've told me like roommate horror stories, being like, oh my God, they just leave their dishes out and things like that. And Brittany's point of responsibility, like you just learned, like you just naturally become part of like your habits. It's not like it's forced on you, like, oh my God, it's a crazy abrupt change. Like, no, I've just always been like this. I just clean up naturally after myself. And like, if my roommate needs help, I'll be like, yeah, like, I got your dishes, like don't worry about it. Just like let me know. And things like that. And like, soft skills of being able to talk to someone older without like being scared, or to ask questions, like my professors, or just to be scared of my professors, and like being able to do interviews, because to me now I don't see like authority figures as scary, but it's just like, oh, they're just in authority, but they're there to help me. So different little soft skills like that, I developed. And then like I never felt like transitioning out of Montessori was anything crazy. I was like, okay, like that's just it, that's life, there's no Montessori left. And now I'm in college on the honor roll and in the honors college, so I guess it all ended up working out. So
I really wanted to piggyback off of that actually. I think that everything Anujan says is very like, I resonate with that completely. Like I think the soft skills and like the very intangible things, the things that you can't like artificially learn and kind of have to be conditioned, are so valuable. Like you can't really put a price on it. And I feel like really growing up, learning those problem solving skills and learning that ability to self reflect, especially in that independent learning setting, is something that you can't compare. And it's something that isn't really taught enough, I feel like, in a traditional setting. If we want to speak to something kind of more solidified or more tangible, so to speak, like Anujan was saying, like I think Anuka, sorry, there's a lot of success stories, at least in my personal experience, and Nuka's personal experience, seeing like our peers go up throughout high school. I mean, I was someone who took pretty much all APs all of high school. And my Montessori peers were the ones taking those classes with me. I was seeing them in all my classes. Um, at the end of the day, I know Anuka did really well in high school, and I did too. I was ranked fifth in my high school out of 450, I think. And I had a lot of success kind of like in the college admissions project or process, sorry. And I'm exactly where I want to be. And I can attribute a lot of that success and that a lot of that ability to succeed through Montessori. I really felt like I had no issue keeping up in any of my classes, especially, advanced placement, of course. I was taking, every course I could. I was always taking the hardest classes. And honestly, I felt like I could be a leader in those classes and when put in those positions. Like I was always one to help other people out and kind of really stay involved in the class. And I above all, something that you can't really teach that I got, especially from my teachers, if any of them are in this chat right now, I think is kind of like the love of learning. I think they really kind of helped me appreciate the power of education, especially like my teachers, they made me feel cared about as a whole person. And like for me, that led me to have like a internal appreciation. And so it really kind of helped me appreciate learning and appreciate teachers, because sometimes, especially like at those younger ages, like sixth, seventh, eighth grade, people can just look at teachers as like authority figures or people who are just trying to tell them what to do. And I feel like in Montessori, especially when you're there for 2-3 years with a teacher at a time, it really kind of helps you bring that familiarity and that sense of like mutual respect, like Brittany was saying, like kind of establishing that like familiar relationship. Like I'm not here to talk down to you, I'm here to like talk to you as a peer and kind of bring you up as an adult almost. And I think those are really, really valuable skills. It helps people want to learn and it helps people want to adapt in these certain situations. And so that's why I think you see so many success stories. And I think Anuka could definitely speak on it. Like a lot of our peers were the ones succeeding at the highest level, and they're out here doing amazing, amazing things. And I feel like that is something that is so specific and so priceless that it's just something that has to be noted.
Thank you so much. I'm curious, Brittany and Sebastian, if you have any thoughts to share around this question of transitioning from Montessori into more traditional environments, be they work-related or school-related, and kind of how you've navigated that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of thoughts, and I think the transition for me was at first difficult. And I would say that was twofold. So one, I went from a Montessori school to a boarding school. So there's the whole dynamic of getting dropped off at school when you're 14 and you no longer have your family or like the community that you were with, for the past 13 years of your life with you. There's another aspect of it. I went from, being the majority in terms of people looking like me to the minority. So there are a lot of, aspects of that involved. But after I got over that initial hump, a lot of the things that were already said, I kind of had the skills to do. And I think the biggest one there is like knowing how to build your community, right? Like I found it very easy to kind of find my circle, navigate among the various groups that were at the university. At the school. And then, classroom wise, it didn't really feel that much different, right? Like, yes, some classes are difficult, but I never felt unprepared at any time, right? Like, if anything, the hardest thing for me to do initially was sit in the desk all day. But and there wasn't like any point where I felt I was underprepared or at a disadvantage, amongst my peers because of the education I received prior to that.
I don't know if we have enough time, but okay, great. But I think I'm going to be probably the only one in here, but I was not a great test taker from starting SOLs in Virginia, the standardized learning test. I really struggled with test taking and until my college years, and had really horrific test anxiety. But the one thing that I'll say about Montessori, which was so great, was I feel like if I was in a traditional learning space, I wouldn't have built the confidence in my own skill set. I think one thing in more of a traditional learning sense was I was a great writer. I did really well in writing essays and doing research-based things. I remember my first research project was actually William Shakespeare in first grade. And we did The Tempest. We actually did like a play with all the other classrooms, and that was really cool. So as Mikey said, and as everyone on the panel is also like touch base on, is I felt like I was always eager to learn. So even if I didn't get the best test scores of the students that I was in, when I was in classrooms, I was in advanced classes, but I didn't test as high as my peers. I still was able to have skill sets moving into more traditional school that really worked, like leadership wise. Like I was president of school in 8th grade at Thomas Jefferson Middle School, which was really cool. And we started fundraisers, and we thought outside of the box to create ways to really help the community. So there was other ways that I think I personally excelled, even though I wasn't a great test taker. So I'll be the one person that I admit, I don't know, even if I was in traditional school, if I would be good at it. But I think that I had other aspects of my life that did shine through in schools that I think that helped propel me to, I don't know, think outside the box.
I really appreciate your vulnerability and transparency there, because that's the reality. Everybody may not be the best test taker, but I think what I'm hearing throughout the conversation and throughout everybody's reflections, frankly, is just around skills that you were able to hone in this kind of community safe setting where you could ask for help, where you could experiment and tinker and make mistakes and mess up the bread recipe, but still feel safe to do that and kind of come back to the table and be open to learning. So really appreciate that reflection. I can't believe we're coming up on our hour already. I'm going to pose a final question, because I'd love the one that came through in the chat to the panelists, which is, as people reflect on the components of a student-centered education model that you were all describing, there might be a lot of resistance to kind of letting that power go in more traditional settings. I wonder what you all would say to someone who is maybe grappling with trying to do something different in a classroom and kind of pushing against what more traditional models look like. Are there any kind of pieces of advice or reflections you have to offer? And that'll be the last question for the group.
I'll take this and I'll try to be short so everyone can get their chance to speak. I feel like this is really about taking a leap of faith, to be honest. I think that some people are just kind of less I don't know. There's a lack of a better term, but like they don't want to try something new because it's unfamiliar. And I feel like with Montessori, it pays dividends, you know. And I feel like people are kind of they can be stuck in their ways about this is how we've always done things and this is how it works. And so let me just trust something that's always been the way it was. But you know, if you really want to make change, sometimes you have to make something different. And you know, I'm not going to sit here and act like I know the statistics of how many children in America, you know, did Montessori all the way through 8th grade, like me and Anuka. But my assumption is it's not a lot. But I think that it really kind of helped us to such a degree that you don't really find that anywhere else. And I feel like that was kind of a leap of faith. Like even for me, I was like, did I really want to go to Montessori for middle school? And did I want to try something different? And I'm, you know, in retrospect, I'm so super glad that I did that. And I feel like it really paid dividends. Like for me, in my work now, working at the level I'm working at, I feel like it really all kind of started on that leap of faith, and kind of centering back to kind of my career as someone who's doing something that maybe people don't see as the most traditional thing. That was also a leap of faith in itself, and I'm so glad that I did that. And so I feel like people need to try to be more open-minded in what they try to do and really think about the benefits. And I feel like the ultimate thing is that you're never stuck in anything, you know, and it might not work for everybody. Montessori may not be for everybody, but it definitely can be. And if it's not, then you can definitely, there's so many other ways you can try to achieve an amazing education. And I think that's really what I have to say about that.
If you don't mind, I'll go next. I think this question is great only because that is literally what my parents' positions were. So my parents immigrated to the US post 9/11. They had no idea what was going on in America. My mom and dad both graduated and they were like, they came to this country, you know, trying to seek better, just, you know, better future for all of us. And then literally randomly one day, because my mom loves learning. Because she was a teacher back in Mongolia. And she loves learning and loves education. And she really wanted us to also, you know, love to learn. And she grew up during Soviet like influence. So obviously her learning was completely different. And she was like, obviously this standard does not work for everyone. So she wanted it different for us. And then she like randomly stumbled on Montessori one day. Like we just happened to get enrolled. And, you know, she put all of us in it. And she just grew to love the structure of it because there's three of us. I'm the oldest, I have a middle brother, and then I have a youngest sister. And if you like were to line us all up and like talk to us and just, you know, get to know us and like our learning styles and our education, like so far, like you will learn that we're all completely different. Like my brother is probably one of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life, but he is a very, very like visual learner. Like that's just the style he learns versus me and my sister. He's just crazy smart. Like we just cannot, like he is just so crazy smart and I'm so proud of him. But my sister and I are very much more tactile learners. And I'm more like visual as well, but definitely more so tactile. And so we love the Montessori materials, but my brother still loved Montessori. Like this is not to say like he didn't like the materials. He did love the materials because he just loved like playing with things, but like he got to see it. Like he got to see it. And then like, because there's a teacher, you know, verbally giving you instructions, like you're also getting that auditory learning style. So versus the traditional setting where you're getting just like visual and auditory or even just visual because, you know, they're just kind of putting on the board or just instructions on the worksheet. So my mom, like, she just loved that, put us in. And like, she also did question, should we go through middle school in Montessori? And like, I took the leap of faith. I think Michael brings up a really good point of it really just does become a leap of faith because, I mean, look at, you know, 50 years ago, like when we do experience change, to go into that change, it is a leap of faith. So, you know, makes a good point. Like, it might not be for everyone, but I think that what is so unique about Montessori is that it is adaptable to be for people. Like, my brother and I have completely different learning styles, and yet it still worked for both of us, because you're able to take what you're learning and apply it to however like best suits you. Like, I love to do arts and crafts and that type of stuff, so I would always do that. My best friend in Montessori, she loved to like write and like just like have it on paper. So she would do that, and it would still like we still learned the concepts the exact same. We just went different ways about learning it. And I think that's I think that's like such a good way, and I think everyone should just consider it. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on, just around the leap of faith that's required. I, for one, am just so encouraged and inspired by all four of you, and want to thank you all again, Anuka, Brittany, Michael, and Sebastian, for joining us. Special shout outs again to Sarah and Monique and the team from National Center for Montessori in the Public Sector for all of the work that you are doing to create more equitable access for young people to models like this. And so thank you everyone again for joining us for today's webinar. We're just going to close with a couple of quick announcements really quickly. The video from today's session is going to be available on the EdFunders YouTube channel in about a week, so check back for that. And we also love to stay connected to all of you, so please feel free to visit that bit.ly link or the QR code to sign up for updates from us. We also hope that you will join us for some future programming. And so in October, we have a couple of funder meetups for the Out of School Time Impact Group and the Equity and Grant Making Impact Group. We also have our registration deadline for our annual conference quickly approaching on Monday, the 25th. And we've got the last webinar in a series with the Department of Education on the Raising Up the Bar initiative focused on achieving academic excellence on November 1st. More information is on the QR code or the link on your screen. And finally, we would love to have folks join us for our conference in Atlanta next month. So please feel free to visit the bit.ly link or the QR code on your screen to register. But we look forward to hosting folks in Atlanta and continuing the conversation about student-centered learning, equitable learning, and really pursuing justice in education. So with that, we thank you so much again for joining us, and we hope everyone has a great rest of your day today.